It's been hailed as a historic deal by most world nations, yet Israel calls it a mistake. On this edition of The Debate, we ask why the only voices of dissent against the agreement between Iran and the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council plus Germany are coming from Israel and Saudi Arabia.
Sunday's deal between Iran and the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council plus Germany was landmark progress toward a solution to a dispute over Tehran's nuclear energy program. Following the agreement, officials from different countries rushed to welcome the decision, with many describing it as an important step toward peaceful settlement of the dispute. But Israel, the sole possessor of nuclear bombs in the Middle East, reacted angrily and described the deal as a historic mistake.
What was concluded in Geneva last night is not a historic agreement. It's a historic mistake. Israel is not bound by this agreement.
Tel Aviv had been lobbying to block the deal for weeks. It became more isolated when its longtime ally, Washington, joined the supporters of the deal.
Israel failed, but this is not the first time they're failing. In Syria, they failed to drag the United States into a war in Syria. They failed again when it came to Iran, and they will fail again because the United States of America has realized that Israel is not an asset. It is a liability.
Many others also say Israel is angry because the deal has put Tel Aviv in the limelight as a non-signatory to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty.
Tel Aviv wants the rift between Tehran and the West to be deeper and stronger. However, through this deal, which we see as an undoubted diplomatic victory for the Islamic Republic, Tel Aviv has been cornered and put in the limelight as the only side which is yet to sign the NPT.
Meanwhile, the agreement between Iran and the 6 countries is drawing mixed reactions from Saudi Arabia. After a day of silence, Riyadh finally commented on the issue, saying that good intentions could lead to a comprehensive solution to Iran's nuclear energy program. But the statement came just hours after Saudi foreign policy advisor Abdullah al-Asker voiced concern over the deal. Asker said that Riyadh would make efforts toward building a nuclear bomb in case the deal fails to prevent Iran from what he claims to be nuclear weapons. Senior advisor to the Saudi royal family, Nawaf Ubaid, also says,
Saudi Arabia's Western allies deceived us in reaching the nuclear accord with Tehran. Saudi Arabia is determined to pursue its own foreign policy goals. We were lied to and things were hidden from us. The problem is not with the deal struck in Geneva, but how it was done.
According to many, the initial agreement between Iran and the P5+1 could be a big blow for Riyadh and Tel Aviv, as the two were pushing for a military option and not a peaceful solution.
You're watching us here on The Debate. With us live from Berkeley is investigative journalist Mr. Lee Kaplan, and live from London, former US Marine Ken O'Keefe. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being with us. I'll put my first question to a guest in Berkeley. Mr. Kaplan, why is Israel calling this a historic mistake?
It's a repetition of the meeting between Chamberlain and Hitler is what it is. The fact is there have been nothing that was accomplished by this to deter or dismantle Iran's nuclear program. While they supposedly will admit Western inspectors to the Fodor and the Natanz reactors, there's absolutely no mention of the Parchin reactor. There's no mention of the fact that the Iranians can still process nuclear fuel, which maybe they can't make a bomb with, but which they can create dirty bombs with conventional weapons. It's a total disaster. And if you were to ask me why I think it's happening, I think it's because with the release of the funds, the $5 to $6 billion in sanctions as a start, the Europeans and even the United States to some degree see oil profits involved, and maybe they can get away from the Saudis for oil, but at the same time they're going to be doing business with the devil.
Well, we are, however, seeing remarks by almost all world nations, including the 6 powers involved here, that this has actually worked well and is allaying concerns. I'd just like to mention there that the Parchin site is a military site. It doesn't have nuclear reactors, but before I put the next question to you, let's bring in the remarks from Ken O'Keefe as well. Now, Mr. Keefe, why do you think Israel still thinks that Iran should be seen as a threat?
Well, because Israel's whole existence stems on creating the kind of conflict that helps justify the imperial policies that exist in the Middle Eastern region. Israel's existence is based on terrorism, the Ergen and Stern gang and the bombing of the King David Hotel, from the Levant affair on up to the USS Liberty and on to 9/11. Israel has been involved in false flag operations to stir up things, to be able to foster conflict and division amongst humanity, and ultimately that is what we must be most aware of right now, because the long history of Israeli false flags make clear that while Israel continues to throw its tantrums because it doesn't get its way, it generally likes to go out and start killing Palestinians or committing false flag operations when it doesn't get its way as well. So make no mistake, those of us who have our eyes open and have half a brain know very well, predictably, what might be happening, and we will identify very quickly who's doing it if a false flag occurs.
Well, Mr. Kaplan, we're hearing remarks by William Hague now. I'd like to quote him. He said to Parliament, "We would discourage anybody in the world, including Israel, from taking any steps that would undermine this agreement, and we will make that very clear to all concerned." Do you think this means Israel has been isolated, at least when it comes to its stance towards Iran's nuclear program?
Well, isolated, it's not getting the support that it should do. You know, I'd like to clarify something here. Mr. O'Keefe there does have half a brain. He's introduced constantly as an ex-U.S. Marine. The Marine Corps kicked him out for taking drugs. He was dishonorably discharged, and there's currently an arrest warrant for him in Hawaii for breaking the law. He's not an expert to be talking about nuclear weapons and all this stuff. And as usual, he's here as a mouthpiece to attack Israel and the Jews. You know, I'm reminded of a famous joke. How many Iranians does it take to change a light bulb? And the answer is none. They prefer to sit in the dark and blame the Jews. So that's why we have Mr. Keith here. Now, having said that,
well, Mr.
what
Kaplan,
I have to say is...
Yes, I would appreciate it, Mr. Kaplan. I would appreciate it if you would just respond to the question that you've posed, because I think speaking about accusations towards each other is not part of the debate. So would you please stick to this point? The question was, these remarks by William Hague, what does it imply in terms of relations with Israel?
Well, what you said pretty much hits it on the button. A lot of these countries feel that there are financial benefits and other reasons to leave Israel twisting in the wind as the Iranians continue to develop nuclear weapons, which ultimately, after Israel, comes the rest of the world. This is the same thing as in World War II. Britain was the aircraft carrier for the U.S. and the democracies up until the invasion by U.S. forces in Normandy, which yes. Mr. O'Keefe has ridiculed, by the way. And, you know, we have the same situation again. If Israel goes, so goes the West. And it's sad, but that's the fact. I believe that money and trade and financial things and you know, unfortunately, world anti-Semitism has played a part in all of this.
Yeah, well, Mr. Ken O'Keefe, I would like to give you the chance here, first of all, to respond to the accusations that were made against you since they were aired. You do have a right to respond to that, and I'll put the next question to you.
Well, I've actually indulged in this before, and I'd like to thank Mr. Kaplan once again for showing the substance of what he stands for, because ultimately the truth is completely against anything he says, so he has to resort to smear tactics and lies. And actually, if there is a lawyer out there who'd like to represent me in a slander case, a libel case, please do help me. I don't have the money to afford it, but if you want to help me pro bono, that'd be great.
Bring it on, Ken.
Next, let's go back to...
Bring it on, Ken.
Indeed, I will. Indeed, I will. Indeed, I will. If the money comes, if someone
Bring
comes,
it on, Ken.
And what I'm going to point out right now in response to you is this man an American citizen? Because I tell you what, who I speak for right now is the 34 American sailors who were slaughtered by Israel in 1967 on that sunny June day.
I am an American citizen, and you gave up your U.S. citizenship.
Okay, I would like to encourage both of us.
You're not a U.S.
Mr.
citizen.
Kaplan.
You are a traitor.
Okay.
I'm a traitor. I'm a traitor to who? I'm a traitor to who, Ken? I don't run around with terrorists. I don't run around with Hamas like you do.
Okay, I would like to encourage both of you, Mr. Kaplan and Mr. Keith,
and Hezbollah.
If we could stick to the topic of the program. The next question, Mr. Keith, if you may, is Mr. Kaplan there suggesting that it would be costly for countries like Britain or the US to part ways with Israel. Why do you think we're seeing these remarks by William Hague? And do you think the fact that this agreement was reached with Iran shows that they have made this decision to distance themselves from the stances of Israel and even Saudi Arabia? We know that the pressure did, of course, exist.
Yeah, actually, what's happening is quite beautiful, because I have never in my life, and really nobody in this lifetime, in this generation, has witnessed what we've seen in the last couple of months. Just a couple of months ago, we were flirting with an escalation of bombing Syria, and that was on the back of a tremendous propaganda campaign, the latest Hitler and Bashar al-Assad, and ultimately it culminated with this blatant false flag in which chemical weapons were used. And what happened was the people of the world, after all of these lies, all of this propaganda, simply did not buy it. They did not buy it. And what happened was really remarkable. I've never seen it in my lifetime. It's really never happened to my awareness. And that is that the Parliament of the UK, which is nothing more than a mouthpiece for Israel and has supported it hand and foot all the way through, the Parliament of the UK simply could not vote in favor of escalating things in Syria. And it wasn't because there were protests. It wasn't because of anything that anybody might have suggested beyond the fact that we just simply didn't buy it. People don't believe people like Lee Kaplan or all the other mouthpieces in the mainstream media who consistently bombard us with lies and use smear tactics and slander to try and divert from the real point. And now what we have, despite all of the propaganda and major institutions of power that are vested in a war, ultimately this signing of a deal with Iran reflects the sanity of people around the world who are insisting no more. We've had enough war, we've had enough of the slaughters, enough of the crimes against humanity, and enough wars for Israel. And in particular, the American patriots out there know darn well that while you swore to uphold the U.S. Constitution, your traitors in U.S. Congress have been sending American sons and daughters off to war to the point where now they're coming home and committing suicide to the point of 22 American sailors and military per day. And Lee Kaplan is a traitor to you, and more of you know this.
Well, Lee Kaplan, the question that I would want to raise here, before you respond, Mr. Kaplan, if I may, is a lot of people are saying that the reason now Israel is so opposed to this deal, and was from the beginning, is that, you know, it's put Israel in the limelight now, especially when it comes to its refusal to sign the NPT or to cooperate with the IAEA. We know that Israel is believed to possess nuclear weapons, and it is the only power in the Middle East, the only entity in the Middle East that has nuclear weapons. And a lot of people are asking why Israel shouldn't be seen as the imminent threat, you know, to Middle East stability, and Iran should. And now do you think with this decision, Israel is kind of being put forward and to the world as the nuclear threat, and this is what it's concerned about?
Okay, can I respond?
Of course.
Well, first of all, let me just briefly say that Mr. O'Keefe renounced his U.S. citizenship and has been a staunch ally of Hamas and other terrorist groups which are for the destruction of the United States. That having been said, let me answer your question. Israel supposedly has nuclear weapons. They probably do. They never signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty because, well, what was the point of doing so? Because it would have lent their hand at that time to the Arab states, 250 million people who were out to destroy people in 22 Arab Muslim countries, including Iran, who were out to destroy the Jewish state. Now, you talk about Israel having nuclear weapons and being the nuclear threat. Israel has never threatened to use nuclear weapons against anybody. Iran, when Ahmadinejad was in power, repeatedly said he was going to wipe Israel off the map. And it repeatedly talked about developing the bomb in order to do so. Now, with this new thing that they worked out at Geneva, there's absolutely nothing in it which even has a requirement that Iran dismantle its ICBMs it's been building and its nuclear-armed satellites, which can deliver nuclear payloads all over the world. So let's not twist things around here and try to suggest that Israel is the nuclear threat or that Israel doesn't have a right to be afraid when the Iranians have continually and even hired mouthpieces like Mr. O'Keefe here, who was kicked out of the U.S. Marine Corps and is a traitor to the United States,
yes,
to go around and specify that Israel is the bad guy.
Well, I would like to point out here, Iran is not an Arab state, first of all. And secondly, you said Iran has...
I didn't say they were an Arab state. Iran is a Persian state. Yes, I know that.
Yes.
I never said it was an Arab state, but Iran is also part of the worldwide Muslim jihad, your Shias.
Yes.
Of course, you oppose what you call the Nawasib, which are the Saudis. Who, and to show you just to give you an illustration of how much of a threat Iran is really posing in this situation, is the Saudis, who you call the Nawasib, who are the biggest enemies of Israel, who have funded numerous terrorist groups against Israel, are so desperately afraid that they're talking about possibly allying with Israel against Iran for protection against Iran's nuclear bombs.
Okay.
So, let's not try and twist this show around and suggest that Israel is the nuclear threat. Israel is the one who's being threatened by the majority. Israel is the one who has an American traitor who was kicked out of the Marines, who's wanted by the courts
yes,
in the United States for breaking the law, to go around and blame the Jews for the problems that are occurring here. And it doesn't do any service to the Iranian people either.
Yes, okay.
If you're worried about a war, you've got to knock off your nuclear program.
Well, you see, Iran has been saying all along that it's never launched any act of aggression against any country over at least a couple of hundred years. It's been saying that it's never threatened to use...
It's
never threatened to use nuclear weapons against anyone. Mr. Kaplan, before you do respond, let's give a chance to our guest, Mr. Keefe. I'll be back to you. Mr. Keefe, why do you think Israel shouldn't be considered a nuclear threat? Mr. Kaplan seems to be insisting there that this is just twisting the issue and that we shouldn't see Israel as a nuclear threat. Iran should be seen as the threat.
Well, of course he would. And the first thing I'd like to say is that actually I served in the Marine Corps and served in combat. Mr. Kaplan is a chicken hawk who's never served in the military and much less picked up a weapon and had to defend himself for the U.S. military. So he is seen for what he is. Aside from that, let me give you an example of what type of individual this man is, because when we look at the U.S. Congress, the last time Netanyahu came to the U.S. Congress,
Answer
he
the
actually
question,
received 29 standing ovations.
Answer her question.
And it was one of the most disgusting examples, one of the most disgusting examples of treason,
yes,
and that is the U.S. Congress. And people like this, Mr. Lee Kaplan, are representatives of a foreign agent, a foreign state. They don't care about the American sons and daughters whose lives have been destroyed by fighting in Iraq, fighting in Afghanistan. Both of these wars largely for Israel, especially Iraq, part of a long-term plan by Israel to destabilize the nations bordering it, part of the Greater Israel Project. And when he talks about Israel not being a threat, what a ridiculous lie that is. There's something called the Samson option, and everybody watching the program right now, go to Google and look up Samson option. The top-level leaders within Israel have threatened to take the whole world down if they feel their existence is threatened. And guess what, Mr. Kaplan? Make no mistake about it, Israel will not be around much longer, because there is no room in a world like this. No room in a world like this where sanity prevails in a racist, rabid, criminal state which continues to commit genocide against the Palestinians and treat them as subhumans. Only people like you delude yourselves. The rest of the world can see it for what it is, and that's why you and Israel are going to be standing in a dark corner all on your own in no time. That's exactly the way the world is going.
Mr. Kaplan, one other question that
he's into his rants.
Mr. Kaplan, one other question that I want to raise here before we run out of time is about this deal in itself. A lot has been said about how much commitment we're going to get from both sides. Iran has been saying that we're going to stay committed as long as the six powers stay committed. Comparisons already being made to the Algiers Accord. Then the United States giving a commitment that it would not intervene in internal affairs, and then Iran accusing it of supporting Saddam Hussein, for instance, during the war, or backing the opposition financially, etc. So do you think that the United States is going to give in to pressure from Israeli lobby groups or to Congress to impose further sanctions against the terms of this agreement, should there be a concern about that?
Well, the U.S. Congress, of course, is working right now to update the sanctions and continue them. There's an issue with the U.S. State Department, which has certain wags in it who are more interested in their careers and arriving at an agreement, even if it's a bad agreement. I find it interesting to be called a traitor by the likes of Mr. O'Keefe, who was a human shield for Saddam Hussein and for Bashar Assad, who really are the 21st century Nazis, the 21st century Hitlers. And it's unfortunate that apparently there are some people out there who listen to his nonsense. There's a criminal bench warrant for his arrest in the United States.
If I had my way, American sons and daughters would not have been sacrificed on the
If you had had your way, if you had had your way, you'd have helped destroy every soldier in Iraq. So don't accuse me of being a traitor. You're such a phony, Ken.
If I had
you
my
fool
way,
nobody.
all of those soldiers never would have went there in the first place and fought for Israel.
Okay, Mr. Kaplan,
you served in combat.
I'd like to get your conclusion because we're running out of time.
Or a chicken hawk.
Okay. We'll see how you really served in
chicken
combat.
Hawk.
Okay,
that's what you are.
We are getting out of time. The concluding remarks by Mr. Keefe. Mr. Keefe, do you predict that the United States would impose further sanctions, give in to the pressure in Congress, and therefore violate the terms of this agreement?
We as people have the power to compel our so-called governments to discontinue all acts of treason and reflect the interests of the people. The people of the United States no longer want to fight any more wars for Israel. They do not want to sacrifice their sons and daughters of the altar of Israel. And ultimately, Israel's weapons program needs to be inspected. Weapons from Israel need to be dismantled along with the United States, and the world needs to continue moving in the direction of complete global disarmament. Not just Iran, not just Israel, but the United States, Russia, England, France, all nations need to disarm. There is no room for nuclear weapons in a world of sanity. And this is where the people are going to take this world, because ultimately we've had it. People around the world are sick and tired of being lied to and being perpetually put in a state of war. Enough, enough, enough.
In London, Ken O'Keefe, former US Marine, thank you very much for being with us. I'd like to thank our guest in Berkeley as well, investigative journalist Mr. Lee Kaplan. Thank you so much, everyone, for staying with us here on another edition of The Debate. From me, Homa Lezgi, until our next programme, it's goodbye.